He had everything: a fortune, a name, a reputation that spoke volumes. But in a flash, he was frozen, face to face with the one thing he'd walked away from over 25 years ago. There, across the crowded New York restaurant, she stood, the woman he'd loved and left. And beside her, a young man. Stay tuned to discover how one man's relentless pursuit of success cost him everything that truly mattered, and the second chance he never saw coming. Ethan Walker sat at the head of a pristine table in one of New York's finest restaurants. Surrounded by powerful business executives, he was a man accustomed to command. Every decision in his life had been precise, controlled, and aimed at one thing: power. Yet tonight, as a lively conversation of market shares and expansions hummed around him, his gaze drifted toward the shadows of the restaurant, drawn to a presence more familiar than he dared believe. Suddenly, there she was, Danielle, the woman he had left behind so many years ago. It had been 25 years since he chose his career over love, leaving her behind in pursuit of the empire he'd dreamed of. She was just as beautiful as he remembered, perhaps even more so. The delicate lines around her eyes only highlighted her graceful maturity, and she moved with the same elegance that had first captured his heart. As she stepped into the golden glow of the chandeliers, he saw her gentle smile, the smile he used to know. But she wasn't alone. A young man walked beside her, tall and striking, his expression calm, yet filled with strength. Ethan's chest tightened. Something about the young man's face, his sharp features, seemed so hauntingly familiar, like a reflection of his own youth. Curiosity surged in Ethan. Who was he? And why did he look so familiar? Unable to focus on the conversation at his table, Ethan excused himself, weaving through the restaurant with one destination in mind. Each step felt like it was weighed down by years of regret and longing. As he approached, Danielle's gaze found him. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by a guarded, unreadable expression. "Danielle," he breathed, the name thick with memories. The sound of his voice seemed to deepen the silence that had stretched between them for so many years. She nodded slightly, acknowledging him, though there was no warmth. "Ethan," she said, her voice clear and steady. Beside her, the young man turned his gaze toward Ethan, his face neutral but curious. "Who?" Ethan's voice wavered as he gestured toward him. "Who is this?" Danielle's eyes softened with an unreadable pain, and finally she replied, "This is Dylan, my son." Ethan's heart stopped and then started again, hammering painfully. His gaze flew from her face to the young man. His son. His breath caught. The ground beneath him felt as if it had shifted, and he fought to stay steady. He was looking at his own son, a son he had never known existed. In the days that followed, Ethan's life continued, but the joy had drained from it. All his accomplishments, all the accolades he'd once believed he needed, now felt hollow. He was haunted by what he'd left behind: a family, the love of his life, a child. He finally gathered the courage to call Danielle. They met again in the same restaurant, their conversation filled with decades of unspoken hurt. "You never even gave me a chance to know him," Ethan said, his voice raw with regret. Danielle's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the pain she'd carried for so long. "You walked away, Ethan. You chose a life without us." Ethan looked away, swallowing hard. He had no words, no explanation that would erase the years of hurt he had caused. The truth was, he hadn't given her a chance because he hadn't wanted to. In his mind, success had mattered more than family, and he'd convinced himself that leaving was better for everyone. And now, standing before Danielle, all he could feel was shame. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was wrong." Danielle looked at him, her gaze softening for just a moment. But she did not relent. Ethan spent weeks wrestling with his own guilt, longing for a chance to know his son. Danielle allowed him to meet Dylan at her place, but the encounter was strained. Dylan's resentment was clear, and Ethan could hardly blame him. "Do you have any idea what it was like?" Dylan's voice cut through Ethan's apologies. "Growing up knowing my father was out there, too busy for me, too busy to even know I existed?" Ethan lowered his head, feeling the weight of his son's words. "I was wrong, Dylan. I know that now. I want to be in your life, but I understand if that's not what you want." Dylan watched him in silence, his expression unreadable. Ethan could only hope that someday his son might be willing to let him in. The next few weeks were difficult for Ethan. Work no longer held the same importance. Instead, he began prioritizing moments where he could see Danielle and Dylan. Slowly, gradually, a fragile connection began to grow. There were tentative smiles and simple questions. Moments of calm where Dylan seemed willing to listen, to let Ethan into his world, even if only a little. Ethan spent countless sleepless nights thinking about the life he could have had with them, the moments he'd missed. He saw photos of Dylan as a baby, stories he'd missed of his son's first steps, his first words, his first day of school. All the years he hadn't been there, all the memories he hadn't shared, he ached with the weight of them. One evening, Ethan reached a turning point. He was at the precipice of the biggest business deal of his life, a merger that would secure his company's future. But as he stared at the contract on his desk, he knew that he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't allow his career to consume him any longer. He walked into the boardroom the next morning, his mind made up. Ignoring the gasps of disbelief, he told his colleagues that he was stepping down. He no longer wanted a legacy that came at the expense of the people he loved. This time, he was choosing family. The decision felt right. Days later, he received a message from Danielle. Dylan says he wants to talk. He's not ready to forgive, but he's willing to listen. Relief flooded through Ethan as he read the message. He knew this wasn't an easy journey, but he had taken the first step, and so had Dylan. A glimmer of hope lit up his world as he thought about what the future might hold. The next day he met Dylan at a small cafe. There was tension between them still, but this time, Dylan allowed him in. They talked about life, about regrets, about moments they'd missed. Ethan didn't push, and he didn't pry. He simply listened. The years of pain couldn't be erased overnight, but as they parted, Dylan turned to him with a small, tentative smile. "I'll see you around, Dad," he said softly, the word Dad filling Ethan with a profound sense of gratitude and relief. This was the beginning of something new, a new chance at family, a chance that Ethan would protect with everything he had. If you found this story as moving as I did, please share your thoughts below and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys. It's never too late to take a second chance at love and family.